Okay, this little video is going to go over some different Christian views about divorce. Now, divorce, as we know, is the legal termination of marriage, and different Christians hold different views about it. So, attitudes to divorce have changed significantly in recent times, as you can see in the graph that we looked at in a previous question. So, some general points though. Marriage is intended to be for life, and it's symbolised by the ring given in the wedding ceremony by being an unbroken circle. Okay, so it's a continuation, it's never ending. Christians believe that if divorce is needed to end a marriage, the couple should have first tried everything possible to reconcile, which means to sort of fix their problems. If one of the couple dies, the marriage is effectively ended and the partner is free to marry again. There are some general Christian teachings which are important for us to know. Now, the wedding ceremony that takes place in a church, in the Church of England service book, it says, "That which God has joined together, let no one divide." Now, that means, therefore, that marriage is a lifelong union. So nothing can divide, nothing can split up that couple that has been joined together in the presence of God, which is obviously the ceremony that takes place in the church. The Bible teaches that marriage is for life. Some examples of this is in Mark's Gospel, Jesus appears to forbid, so not allow, divorce. And it states, "Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her." A second example of this is that in Corinthians, Paul writes, "To the married I give this command, a wife must not separate from her husband. But if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife." Essentially, what this is saying is that a wife and a husband cannot separate from each other. If they do separate, they must remain unmarried, or they reconcile their differences and they go back to being a couple again, but they cannot get remarried. So that's a general idea here. Okay, so remember, marriage is intended to be for life. And it is the case that divorce is never encouraged, but there are, and we're going to look at in a moment, some different beliefs among Christianity, which has some sort of leniency and different views. So it's important that we have a look at those. Catholic Christian views. So Catholics, remember, are quite traditional. They often have the most orthodox or the most strict views out of these viewpoints, not just for marriage and divorce, but for other aspects of life as well, such as contraception that we looked at last lesson. The Catholic Church does not recognise divorce because they believe marriage is for life. They also don't believe or recognise divorce because Jesus said that divorce is wrong, such as in the Bible that we looked at on the previous slide. The Catholic Church does not believe divorce is possible because marriage vows are a covenant, which is a promise or an agreement made by both partners to each other and to God. A Catholic who gets a divorce cannot remarry in a Catholic church. So, what that means is that a Catholic may be able to get a divorce, but they cannot remarry in their Catholic church. So, consider what that might mean for someone who is a devout Catholic, how they might feel about wanting to be able to get remarried, but not being allowed to do so in a Catholic church. An annulment, which is when the marriage is declared void or not legitimate, may be allowed in certain circumstances, such as underage marriage or forced marriages where there has not been consent. And a source of authority reference here for you for a Catholic Christian view is the following. Between the baptized, a ratified and consummated marriage cannot be dissolved by any human power or for any other reason other than death. And that's from the Catechism of the Catholic Church 2382. Now, what that means in layman's terms is that anyone who is a member of the Catholic Church and a marriage that has been certified and consummated, which means if they have had sexual intercourse together, cannot be dissolved. And that means that it cannot be broken by anyone. And the only reason out of the only way out of a marriage
is death. Protestant Christian views. Divorce is not to be encouraged, but sometimes may be necessary. Now, remember, different to Catholics, Protestants are a little bit more liberal in their views. It's often a more updated version of the Catholic beliefs. So they say that obviously they don't encourage divorce because marriage is not to be entered into lightly. It is a promise and a commitment that you make to each other. But they understand that human beings sometimes make mistakes, and sometimes relationships do break down, and that can be as a result of several factors: finances, children, the pressures on marriage of that, and so on and so forth. They also recognise that God forgives mistakes, and after asking for God's forgiveness, believers may divorce and marry again. So it is allowed under Protestant Christian views, and God will forgive them if they ask for God's forgiveness, and they may divorce and get remarried. Divorce must be acceptable as UK laws allow it. So obviously it is a legal termination of marriage, and regardless of your religious beliefs or perspective, by law you are allowed to get a divorce. So Protestant Christians say it must be acceptable. Divorced people can remarry in a Protestant church if the local clergy agrees to it. Otherwise, the marriage may be blessed. So typically you go and have a meeting with the minister of the church, and it will be their decision. They'll interview you, they'll ask you questions, that kind of thing. And typically you are allowed to remarry if your arrangement is blessed. It is up, like it says, it is up to the individual minister to decide whether a couple is allowed to remarry in their church. So you could try several different churches, for instance, but it is down to the individual. And lastly, we have the humanist or / non-religious views. So there are some varied views here, and this depends on anyone who is not prescribed to a religion. It can be your viewpoint, but these are several popular ones. Humanists believe that the breakdown of marriage can cause problems within the family, so they recognise that there are complications, but they accept that divorce can sometimes be necessary. They do not associate marriage with God, so they do not feel that any promises are broken. So as a Catholic Christian might feel, marriage is a covenant made between the couple and God, humanists do not associate marriage as being a holy or religious ceremony. They only see it kind of in legal terms. Okay, so it's a legal contract. So they don't feel that any promises are broken between these two people and God. Some atheists may object to divorce because of social or cultural reasons, but not religious ones. So they might, ethically, they might decide that they don't agree with it, or perhaps in different countries, different cultures, there might be traditions that they have to follow. It might not be grounded in religion. Some atheists will argue that it's up to the couple to do what's best for them. So, for example, the situation ethicists that we look at with regards to contraception, they do think that it's best on a case-by-case basis. The couple should do what is best for them. That's a popular atheist belief. Remember, atheist is someone who does not believe that God exists. And a source of authority here for you: though marriage is a useful institution, humanists do not believe that it's sacred. They recognise that some relationships fail and so support liberal divorce laws. And that's from Family Matters in the British Humanist Association.